Hi, my name is Gulru Atak, and I'm running innovation for Treasury and Trade Solutions in Citi. Today, I'm honored to host Nuno Sebastiao, the CEO of Feedzai, and we will have a great chat about Nuno's company, how it's bringing efficiencies and how it's bringing increased controls into financial services. Hi, Nuno, welcome.
Hi, Guru. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So first, would you like to tell us and me about the great company you built, Feedzai, which is a great partner to Citi so far?
Absolutely. So at Feedzai, what we do is we manage the entire life cycle of risk from the minute consumers on board or get financial services to while they transact and while they operate in financial services systems. We've been working with Citi in a number of areas, and we've been happy to call Citi Ventures an investor in the company for now 4 years. So it's been a journey. When the investment was done, we're a very small company. We're over 500 people today, covering the globe, and very, very excited with the partnership we have.
That's amazing. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your customer profile? Who is using your services? Is it the traditional banks, the incumbents, or fintechs? And how do they implement your software?
It's very interesting because when we were starting, it was essentially, we didn't have yet the innovation movement we have today. So it was essentially large financial services organizations that wanted to innovate. They wanted to think ahead and think for the consumer. Over the last 3-4 years, I would say, we have seen, newcomers, challengers. Some of them even sponsored by these large FIs completely reinvent the way consumers interact with banking, the way consumers interact with financial services. So we, as a company, we kind of see ourselves, supporting the two worlds. On one hand, we take the obsession with removing customer friction that is very characteristic of the newcomers, the challengers, the fintechs. We take that to our more established financial services clients, but while at the same time, on the reverse, we take to the challengers and to the innovators the importance of having regulations, the importance of compliance, the importance of risk management at scale that we've learned, that we've developed with our large FI clients. So everyone benefits from this, ecosystem that we're working on.
So it's interesting because you are almost sitting at the center of a kind of a knowledge and best practice sharing, like sharing the best practices in terms of innovation, being agile and nimble with your traditional customers, and then what you can get as best practices from the traditional ones with the newcomers. That's fantastic. And as far as I know, your journey started more focusing on one side of the potential fraud detection and then extended into the larger size. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the focus area now? Is it more in consumer payments, institutional payments?
Absolutely. And the point you mentioned is very important, about the way we work with these organizations. Imagine the following. We have built recently in one of the regions what they call a completely serverless bank. So in 9 months, we went from start to launching a bank, a fully regulated with a banking license in a region. And one of the things they say is they don't have one server. Imagine that, or the equivalent of that, in a large FI. There's road. So, but at the same time, we work with them and told them, look, you need to be absolutely clear about risk and risk management. But then again, to your point about where we focus as a company, we've also seen from these innovators, these challengers, today they care about consumer friction. So what they care is, can I manage risk holistically? So whereas we as a company started in what you'd classify historically as transaction fraud, what we've seen and where the world is going is managing risk holistically from the onboarding, origination, while people transact, but also for AML and compliance. So we as a company, what we're building as in our journey, in our growth journey, is the one central engine where you have consumer information, where you have the bank information and manage risk from the moment you onboard the client to the moment is operating in that organization. So that's what we're doing as a company.
That's great, because you're not looking in terms of verticals or silos or just one
Correct.
piece around the entire journey, but an end-to-end holistic view, which I think brings the power of Feedzai solutions. And
Correct.
I really like the way that you mentioned you started actually focusing on a specific pain point, a very niche area, but then like started building on that niche area and extended into an end-to-end, concept. And it's great that you haven't actually started with the technology itself, because that's something that we see quite often these days, right? Like people start, oh, what problem can I solve with data
Yeah.
science or AI? Why do you think fraud is a good use case for artificial intelligence?
Well, it's a very good question. It was one of the more, it's actually one of the more developed use cases. And there's a number of reasons why. First, there's wide availability of data, historical data. We know the behavior, we know the patterns. What hasn't had happened was making use of that data. So the data was just sitting around and not being, digested, processed. And what we've seen is we could apply machine learning to this finite, well-identified problem, starting with, transaction fraud initially, but then understanding the journey. A good example is, if you look at transaction fraud, you're looking at one event, one payment, let's say, right? And you can say this is good or bad. But if you look at a sequence of events, you can say this account or this person is,
Mhm.
orchestrating to do good or bad behavior, right? It's the same data, and that data is there. So machine learning suits itself well because the data is well structured, is a well identified problem, and we know what we're looking for. So, and this is the, let's say, the ideal situation for the application of machine learning techniques.
That's fantastic. And as you said, looking at your customer base, probably your traditional clients like Citi, we started appreciating and respecting the data that we have, and maybe like understanding the real value of the data more recently, right?
Correct.
And then we also know that in AI and machine learning use cases, it's like, it's not that more data is better, but if you can enrich the data with multiple data sources, what you generate as results would become much more meaningful.
Right.
So what I really wonder is, in your approach, or in the approach that you are taking with your clients, do you just take a single institution view when you are looking to detect potential fraud, or is there any data sharing among your client base?
Yeah, so really good question. And technology has evolved, fortunately, into a place where we become really strong is we learn about what we call profiles. Profiles is behaviors. We don't know that a particular behavior is from Gulru or from Nuno. We know that there's a behavior, right? And with that, we manage things like as GDPR or data privacy acts, and which is really really important. And also what those profiles, what those insights gives. When we go and work with a client, and then we work on the client's data, we're able to understand, okay, I've seen this type of profile and I know it correlates with good or bad behavior. If I identify the same profile here from a client of that institution, I'm going to be able to flag it. And this is, I think, is the best of both worlds. That is not that, organization A is sharing your information or my information. I wouldn't want that. You wouldn't want that with another organization, but we share a behavior. There's a fingerprint that tells me that. And it's also then very important to understand that if we think about globally, behaviors are very different. A couple of examples. In Asia Pacific, where we see a lot of innovation in this area, they've kind of like jumped, what we call in Western Europe, the payments with cards or card-based type of payments. They're wallet first. So the
Mhm.
profiles, the mechanisms are different. And then if you go into other regions like Latin America, it's still different. What we have is the ability of ingesting these unique local data sets, then augmented with local information that they might have, bring that into the platform and give you a global view but a personalized one to that particular region, that particular segment of client, and that particular institution. All of it while managing privacy concerns and whatnot. That's the power that we bring to the table, and that's the power that the machine learning, the way we use it, can offer.
So you are actually able to aggregate the signs of typical behavior of different profiles of, let's say, bad actors, right?
Right?
And make it available, not in terms of specific data, but as profiles to
That's
your
exactly it.
customer base. And then you're actually enriching it with regional nuances as well, which
That's
is
exactly.
fantastic.
That's
And
exactly.
we know the bad actors are not siloed, right? Most
They
of
don't.
the time, a
They
bad
don't have to
actor,
follow. They don't
yeah,
have to follow privacy concerns.
exactly.
You
Or
know.
they don't necessarily say, okay, today I'm going to do just money laundering and tomorrow I will do some cyber attacks for, ransomware. So it's
That
most of the time the actors are the same, right?
That's exactly it. They don't distinguish between account takeover or transactional fraud or money laundering. They don't even think about it like that. They're engaged in a bad activity. Then
Yeah.
we kind of like segmented it historically. And I think it was also because of technology limitations that today just are not there anymore. We can correlate that data. We can ingest that information and then understand, holistically in a global perspective, is this good or bad behavior?
That's amazing. And you said a magic word there. You said the technology limitations, right? So that reminded me of sometimes people almost trying to solve for world's hunger problem with, a specific technology. For a long while, it was blockchain. In the meantime, it's something. Nowadays, we speak a lot about Internet of Things, 5G. So, how do you think we can have a much more realistic dialogue about what these technologies can do and cannot do, especially around AI?
I think, like many, I think the innovation ecosystem, it has its responsibility in this. We sometimes overhype a technology, right? That means it's going to solve world anger, as you're saying. It doesn't. It can be applied. Machine learning doesn't solve everything. It can be applied to some problems, but very example, when we are building our product and as our product matures, machine learning is at the core of the product, but it's not the only thing we use, right? Because it doesn't address everything. I'll give you an example. We need to address mechanisms like ensuring that our models and our techniques have something we call fate into account. Fate is fairness, accountability, transparency, and ethics. Because with machine learning, you can actually train models to pick up bias based on gender, ethnicity, and all that. So you got to be careful with you and always understand I'm using this technology to solve this problem. And this technology is one of many that I might use. It's not what's going to, by itself magically solve everything. It doesn't work like that,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's really important also, that happens to me a lot when I'm speaking with executives at organizations to manage those expectations, and they do need to be managed.
Yeah, and it's almost like individuals or organizations, right? If you are not aware of your, let's say, development areas or weaknesses, you cannot really start improving yourself. And it
Correct.
goes the same with the technology, right? If you're not aware of the limitations of the technology, you cannot start building better and better and becoming better and
Correct.
better
Correct.
technologies. As the world is like moving to more digital, and I think COVID-19 was probably one of the very unique crises where digital and technology was part of the solution, right? Part of the response to the crisis, which means we are moving to a more digital society. What role do you think can AI play in ensuring that the more digital society is a better one rather than, a more
Yeah.
threatening one?
Uh, well, there's all debate that can be had about that, and as we are doing this, having this conversation, I think we're all kind of like saturated of sitting at home and looking at screens and computers. but and so we as society need to interact. But what digitization has done is things that were before lengthy, that would take forever, now they're just faster. It enabled, is an enabler. But like any other technology, as an enabler, it needs to be, okay, what are we enabling? Are we enabling conversations like this? Are we enabling transactions? And in our case, what we see in financial services is, and we really, I truly believe this, we see ourselves as part of a movement that enables people that before couldn't have a banking service because it was expensive to serve them, and they will, and the banks wouldn't have a return. Today, because costs are coming down, they can get a banking service. And we work with clients in regions, for instance, in India and in others, where just enabling that makes a difference on people's lives. And I believe that this digitization that we're all observing and accelerated by the current crisis do benefit a lot of the society from. Before they didn't have a service, now they do. Before they weren't part of the global payment system, now they do. I can send a payment to someone in a remote village in India. That wasn't possible before. And I think that's the, when we all sit down and sit back and reflect, that's what we do. That's what we enable.
That's
Right?
amazing. You have a purpose as a company, which is
Yeah, we do.
fantastic.
We
And the
do. We do.
technology has a purpose. So it's making, financial services democratized,
Yeah.
available to everyone, financial inclusion. It's really amazing. Maybe one question again during the pandemic. I know you had some interesting tools that you used, but how did you stay connected with your internal teams, with your customers, stakeholders, with Feedzai's community?
Yeah. So it's interesting because as a company, we're widely distributed. I mean, we're just over 500, and we have 9 offices. And in I think the time zone range we cover is like 17 hours. So between one employee and the one further ahead and the one further behind. So even personally, I already had at my house here, at my parents' house, and my house in the US, I've had the exact same setup. Communication setup. So to us as a company, it actually didn't change much. So much so that when COVID hit, we made a couple of tests to make sure that we would support our clients, but we went remote very easily. And frankly, it accelerated some segments, not all, it's fair to say, but it accelerated some segments of the clients we were having, because all of a sudden, digital was the only channel they had. They had to close their branches. They had to close their physical stores, right? And what we saw ourselves is, and there was internal task forces of, let's help them. Let's make sure that in a couple weeks they can launch this service in as many countries as possible, because otherwise, I mean, some of them would actually risk, severe financial losses. And we saw ourselves in also we work with some organizations in the US, in this PPP plan, enabling that, making sure that we could facilitate, or that we did our part, as small as it was, to make sure that money would reach people. And I think that's important. So as a company, I think we were prepared, and we helped and worked with our customers to, because we're all in the same boat. We were going through it all together. So
Oh, thank you. This is super impressive, Nino. Actually, Feedzai is one of the companies at the forefront applying AI practically in a true pain point, not just for
right.
financial services industry, right? It is almost like fighting against the bad actors. So very fascinating. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Thanks for all your insights that you
Thank you.
shared.
Thank you, Guru. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.